Hello, I'm going to continue my law lecture about ministerial responsibility. So, what have ministers been obliged to resign over? Sometimes they've been forced to resign over one-off political mistakes, and they might choose to go of their own accord, and the Prime Minister say, why don't you just resign, otherwise I'll sack you, and it's mildly less embarrassing to fall on your sword, as in just write a letter of resignation, which the Prime Minister will then accept. So, for example, Dr. Hugh Dalton was Labour's Chancellor Exchequer in 1947, and Chancellors observed budget purda. Would have been this Urdu word meaning curtain, as in women to show their modesty would just never be seen by a man outside the family. But in this case, budget purda is no contact with the press in case you blurt something out, because it's all market sensitive information. And in an unguarded moment, he divulged something to a journalist, and that was market moving. So that was the end of him as Chancellor Exchequer. Or Edwina Currie in 1988 over various things. I can't remember whether was it cervical cancer, or was it salmonella, about how you could get salmonella, and she said the wrong thing, and so that was the end of her as Health Secretary. Or Amber Rudd more recently in 2018 as Home Secretary, but that was partly over the mishandling of the Windrush affair, over people who moved to the United Kingdom from Commonwealth countries up until about 1972, and then right before 72 could stay, but then the government said there was going to be a hostile environment for illegal immigrants. Many of the people who'd arrived prior to 1972 hadn't got any documentation, and the assumption was going to be, well, unless you can prove you were here legally before 1972, that's it, you'll be booted out, and you have to have at least two pieces of documentation for every year you've been here. And who was going to keep that almost 50 years worth of documentation? So some people who were here lawfully were deported. Even more shockingly, some people who were British citizens were deported. Right. Anyway, there are other reasons to resign or else be sacked from the cabinet or as a junior minister. And that's a personal failure or misjudgment. Incidentally, the junior minister is the one who's known as Minister of State for whatever, as opposed to cabinet ministers known as Secretary of State for whatever, usually. So Sir Samuel Hoare in 1935 would be an example of somebody who seemed to be guilty of a policy failure, perhaps it's a U-turn. The national government, which is a coalition, mainly Conservative, few Labour and Liberals, won an election in 1935, and the defence policy was collective security. So any other League of Nations country which is attacked, we will go to the aid of. And then Italy invaded Abyssinia. Both League of Nations countries and the United Kingdom said this is unacceptable. But then France and the UK, they offered a deal to Italy. If you can have 2/3 of Abyssinia if you'll just leave the other third alone. But anyway, that was reneging on his electoral pledge. So he went, and he was later made ambassador to Spain, a crucial position during the Second World War. It was neutral. But ministers sometimes resign over a departmental fault. So the traditional picture was they had to resign if their department messed up. It had been messed up quite badly, because of course they're trifling mistakes every day. De minimis non curat lex. But the context has changed. In the 19th century we had very small government. The night watchman state were no longer such minarchists. In the 20th century, ministers' roles have changed considerably, and the government has got its tentacles into all areas of life. So this convention doesn't appear to be fully observed, because fewer and fewer ministers are willing to resign. As the government does more and more, then of course there are more and more mistakes. So Sir Thomas Dugdale, he would be an example, resigning over Critchell Down in 1954. Lord Carrington, who was Foreign and Commonwealth Secretary, he resigned in 1982 over the Falklands. The Falklands was invaded, and he said, well, someone's got to carry the can for this. He didn't cause the invasion. Did he not see it coming? Was it not really his responsibility? Maybe not. And people say it was about the last honourable resignation from the cabinet. So Lord Carrington, he only died, I think it's 2 years ago, having reached the age of 100. The old fox, as Robert Mugabe called him. So was it a strategic blunder? Was it a political misjudgment? Departmental mistake? It's debatable. It was the Franks report in 1983 about the run-up to the Argentine invasion of the Falklands. Those islands in the South Atlantic, closer to Argentina than any other country. If you're a Spanish speaker, you'll know them as Las Malvinas. Okay, Beverly Hughes would be another notable example of a resignation of this kind in 2004. I remember Estelle Morris, Education Secretary under Tony Blair. She resigned in 2003, saying she wasn't up to the job. So there's also a policy or operational divide. So we need to update individual ministerial responsibility. In 1983, at the Maze prison in Northern Ireland, there was a large breakout. About 38 terrorists got out. James Pryor, who was the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, stood down. There was a terrible row when Michael Howard was the Conservative Home Secretary in 1995. Did he threaten to have a certain prisoner governor removed for saying something which was unhelpful to the Conservative Party? And then he was challenged by this by Jeremy Paxman, who was the BBC's attack dog interviewer, famously asking Michael Howard 14 times consecutively, did you threaten to have him removed? Now, Howard kept obfuscating, so his periphrastination was, no, I didn't have him removed. No, threatened to have him removed. We know you didn't have him removed. Did you threaten to have him removed? That was the operative word, threatened, which Howard kept avoiding. It seemed to me to be affirmative silence. By not engaging with the substantive issue about threatening to have someone removed, it seems to me the only logical conclusion we can draw is that he did threaten to have him removed. Otherwise, we would have said no. So the Passport Agency screw up under Jack Straw in 1999, and passports were being issued way too slowly, but Jack Straw, then the Labour Home Secretary, didn't resign. Anyway, there's collective cabinet responsibility. They've got to keep certain things confidential. They're meant to be to speak unanimously on various issues, to present a united front, and to voice their confidence in each other. But it's been suspended on a number of occasions, as I might mention later. Anyway, a notable case about this is Attorney General Jonathan Cape in 1975. So what's the purpose of collective cabinet responsibility? Well, it's supposed to be useful to the government, maintain party discipline, and also so we know what the government believes in. They're all singing from the same hymn sheet, not contradicting each other. We know what policy is. Otherwise, it'd just be unworkable, tearing each other's throats. So they often have to advocate for policies they don't believe in. And if they find that unconscionable, they're going to have to stand down. I mean, who honestly would believe in every single policy implemented by any government, including his own? Surely not. You can only agree with every single policy if you have absolute control over every policy, and you don't, and then you change your own mind from time to time. So let's see how this convention operates in practice. It was Michael Heseltine in 1986. He was a cabinet minister under Margaret Thatcher, Conservative, and he resigned over the Westland helicopter affair about which company was going to build helicopters for the British Army. Should they get an American one or a British one? He's quite a Europhile, thought the Europeans should do it.